Hello everyone, and welcome to In the Minds of Madness. Now, I know there's been somewhat of a hiatus, and I will be doing a video kind of touching on the issues that I've been having these past few months that have held up video production. But that is for another video. Today, we are going to be discussing video games and why they get Lovecraft wrong. Now, Lovecraftian style video games have been becoming more and more popular, and I cannot tell you how many times I've had people ask me to do a video on a specific one, Bloodborne. I've pointed out the reasons why I won't do specifically Bloodborne, but I will be touching on a couple of things today, and that is the fact that most video games get Lovecraft wrong. Now, to touch upon the reasons why video games get Lovecraft wrong, we must analyze what Lovecraftian horror is, which I have touched upon many of the main points of Lovecraftian or cosmic horror in the first episode of In the Minds of Madness, but we will be doing a quick summary. The two main concepts of Lovecraftian horror is the unnameable and hopelessness. The unknowable being something that the human mind cannot comprehend or is outside our realm of knowledge, while the hopelessness is you are not a hero, you cannot stop the great evil, all you can do is survive it, and many of the times in Lovecraftian horror, you don't. Because of this, Lovecraftian horror does not translate well as a video game because of the hopelessness. You're not a hero in Lovecraftian horror, but in a video game, you play the hero. So those concepts don't mesh well together. You can't be a hopeless, average person in a video game and the video game be enjoyable most of the time. There are a few genres that can pull it off, but most of them can't. Then there's the factor of the unknowable. It is very difficult to pull off this aspect in video games because video games are a visual medium. It is very hard to paint a force as something unknowable and something that the mind cannot comprehend when you're putting an image to it, you're putting a visual form to it. So those 2 points contradict each other when it comes to video game media. Now, just because something isn't Lovecraftian horror does not mean it cannot be inspired by Lovecraft. There are many good games that are inspired by Lovecraft. They pull elements from the works of Lovecraft. And these games, as I've said, can be very enjoyable. But because of the fundamental aspects of video games, as I said, it is extremely difficult for a video game to be truly Lovecraftian. Now, onto what video game genres do somewhat pull off Lovecraftian horror. One is the obvious, horror. Many games, like Amnesia, pull off Lovecraftian horror. The entire time in Amnesia, the true dark evil force is never really shown, as far as I know. I've never been able to beat the game, because I am a coward when it comes to video games. But the entire time this darkness is following you, it's one of the primary reasons why everything's happening, but it's never really explained. And the horrors that the main character goes through, and the difficulties with the fact that the monsters you don't fight, you escape, and looking at them can drive you insane. Another genre, which I have also touched upon this, it's not as strong as horror, but many roguelikes and roguelites are starting to mirror some aspects of Lovecraftian horror. 2 examples that come to mind, which I've already touched on these also, they are great games in my opinion, are Darkest Dungeon and Sunless Sea. Both of those are very close to being true Lovecraftian. Now, of course, in the games you can ultimately succeed, but the difficulty to succeed is so great, and the risks are so great that it is almost impossible to do without major plans, things like that. The main game I'm going to talk about that, while it is inspired by Lovecraft, gets Lovecraft wrong, is Bloodborne. Now, do not take this out of context. I am not saying that Bloodborne is a bad game. It is a pretty good game. I have not played it myself, but I have enjoyed watching other people play it, and I have enjoyed delving into the lore. But it falls a little short when it comes to a true Lovecraftian horror game. From what I've seen, From Software has made, as one of my commenters has said, the closest to a love letter to Lovecraft as possible. This game is seeping with Lovecraftian influence. In the beginning, it seems to be nothing more than Victorian horror influence, but after a certain point, the lore starts delving into other things, and you start seeing that underlying Lovecraftian story going on. And it culminates in fighting things that could have possibly been pulled from Lovecraft's imagination. They are that grotesque. But where Bloodborne falls short are those elements that I've talked about, those shortcomings of the medium. In Bloodborne, a lot of these Lovecraftian creatures, these cosmic forces, you are able to kill. And yes, while the game doesn't really have a true happy ending, your character is still able to, in most cases, overcome these great cosmic forces and destroy them completely, which in Lovecraft, in cosmic horror, that never happens. Now, it's not a flaw of the developers, it's a flaw of the medium. Video games, as I've said, they have a difficulty with translating Lovecraftian or cosmic horror because of the base elements of video games. You don't want to play a game where you're just a random person that is more than that can't do anything. You want to play a hero. Most games, you play the hero. The only games where your character is just an average person is usually horror games and some roguelikes. The shortcomings of Bloodborne, with it being Lovecraftian, is not in the hands of the developers, it is in the medium itself. But that brings up a question. If video games can never truly do Lovecraftian horror, minus some games in the horror genre, should people not attempt to make Lovecraftian games? Should people not create games inspired by Lovecraft? And I say no. Honestly, I feel that just a game being inspired by Lovecraft is a great thing, because it adds a layer to the game. It adds a more in-depth story to the game. Now, of course, some of these games that incorporate Lovecraftian elements just throw a bunch of tentacles on stuff. Those usually not so much, but those games like Bloodborne that really go in depth with the Lovecraftian inspiration, they turn into very good games. I mean, look how popular Bloodborne has been. Look how successful Bloodborne has been. And as some of you guys have said, it is a love letter to Lovecraft. And I think that's great. I love that. And I feel like game developers should, instead of trying to make Lovecraftian or cosmic horror games, that it's fine if you make a game that is inspired by Lovecraft and pulls elements. You don't have to strive for being a true Lovecraftian horror game because it's a game. It's not going to get Lovecraft right because it's a game. So I feel game developers, yes, keep on doing what you're doing. Just look at Bloodborne when you're going to be introducing Lovecraftian elements. Tie it into the story and don't treat it as, oh, well, we're just going to stick some tentacles on some things and be like, oh, look, it's Lovecraftian. We're reaching out to those people who love Lovecraftian because it has tentacles. And it's kind of the same thing with games that use Cthulhu as a boss or a monster. You're not supposed to be able to beat Cthulhu. So putting that aspect in the game as something you can fight goes completely against the concepts. So that brings another episode to a close, I wanted to touch upon Bloodborne because I've gotten hundreds of comments saying I should play it, I should try it out. And while I am unable to play the game, I have been listening to your all's feedback and I have been doing a lot of research. I know I've just kind of touched upon very basic aspects, very broad aspects, but I have looked in depth, and yes, Bloodborne, the lore aspects of it, they are very good. I love what From Software did with the story behind Bloodborne. But as I said, it is a game that is heavily inspired by Lovecraft, but it's not Lovecraftian horror. But as I said, that is not a bad thing. So that is enough of my ramble. I will be attempting to produce these more often. The issues I've been having this year are pretty much over, so hopefully we have smooth sailing from now on. So, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.